Alam mo ba kung anong nangyari noong 1948? Malamang ay panahon pa yon ng mga lolo't lola mo. Pero sa pagkakaalam ko, kung 70 years ago yon, ito yung tinatawag nilang panahon ng... Hindi ng dinosaurs. Panahon ng Hapon, kakatapos mo lang ng World War II. Ang daming naghirap at namatay. Isa sa pinakagrabing pangyayari sa kasaysayan ng mundo. Naghanap ng kasunduan sa pagitan ng mga bansa para matiyak na hindi na mauulit ang mga pangyayari noon. At magkaroon ng iisang simbolo ng pagkakaisa, ang Universal Declaration of Human Rights o UDHR. Nagkasundo ang UN General Assembly tungkol dito kaya't isinalin sa napakaraming lengguwahe ang UDHR. Pero ano nga ba ang human rights? Simple, ang human rights ay mga karapatan mo dahil ikaw ay isang tao. Ang ibig sabihin mula nang ipinanganak ka, meron ka ng human rights. Lahat ay pantay-pantay sa pagkamit nito. Kagaya ng ibang pangangailangan mo, mahalaga ang mga ito para mabuhay ka ng maayos. Kung walang human rights, wala ka na ring proteksyon. May mga ibang taong nakulong o nabitay dahil lang sa Facebook status. May 30 articles ang UDHR. May mga civil and political rights tulad ng karapatang mabuhay, bumoto, karapatang magpahayag, at hindi matorture. Ang bawat karapatan ay may kinalaman sa ibang mga karapatan. Hindi ito pwedeng tingi. Pag inalis ang isang karapatan, maaapektuhan ng iba. Halimbawa, kung wala kang bahay, nakatira ka sa kalsada, hindi ka makatulog o makakain ng maayos, magkakasakit ka. Hindi ka pwedeng pumasok sa school, hindi ka rin makakahanap ng trabaho. Ang paglabag sa karapatan mo sa isang maayos na bahay ay paglabag sa iba mo pang mga karapatan para mabuhay ng maayos. Ito yung tinatawag na economic, social at cultural rights. Nagkasundo ang maraming bansa sa UDHR. Pero sino nga ba dapat ang nangangalaga nito? Sa totoo lang, gobyerno dapat ang nagtitiyak na naibibigay ang lahat ng mga karapatan. Pero madalas mayroong mga gobyernong lumalabag dito. At dahil ito ay isa lamang deklarasyon, madami ang hindi sumusunod. Pero madami na din naman ang naglagay ng human rights sa kanilang mga konstitusyon, kaya dapat tiyakin na maibibigay ang mga ito. Maiintindihan mo ang iyong mga karapatan sa pamamagitan ng pag-alam sa mga ito. Pero para matiyak ang karapatan mo, kailangan mo ring magbantay na ang karapatan ng iba ay hindi inaabuso o nilalabag. Manindigan ka para sa karapatan mo at karapatan ng iba. Dahil karapatang pantao ay para sa lahat.
My name is Kay Candasa and I'm 36 years old. I'm an intersex woman of trans experience, living in Amsterdam. I've been living here for the past 11 years and I moved to the Netherlands because of my trans activism and also for love. For an activist in the Philippines, I don't feel really safe and protected.
August 16, 2019, the Department of Justice filed a brief in the U.S. Supreme Court arguing that federal law does not prohibit discrimination against transgender persons based on their transgender status.
We all dream of having a prosperous life, a dignified life, and as a woman of color, as a trans person. Which the reason I moved to the Netherlands and sa Pilipinas kasi, given na yung experience ko as a trans person sa atin na yung laging kasama mo yung violence, yung bullying, discrimination, open siya. So when my father find out na babae nga talaga ako, nireject ko yung imposition nila ng gender na mali para sa akin, doon nag-umpisa yung violence. Na binubugbog ako ng tatay ko from 5 years old. And then, yeah, pambubugbog ng started with the family and then going to school, nabubuli ako everyday. And then college. I graduate as a nurse. Doon ko naman napagtantong mahirap maghanap ng trabahong bilang nurse na kikilalanin yung pagkatao mo at igagalang. So, that time, nahirapan akong i-practice yung profession ko. Kasi lahat ng hospital, hindi sila ganun kasensitibo sa issue ng kinakarap ng mga trans Pinay na minsan takot kang mag-apply ng trabaho dahil mahuhusgahan ka or ma-reject ka. And my womanhood, my personhood are not recognized back home. So sabi ko, I'd rather move outside the Philippines. Sa Holland, andun yung mga batas nila na enjoy mo kasi by law protected ka, na-recognize yung pagkatao mo. So, lahat tayo ay may SOGIE, so kailangan lahat protektado, hindi lang yung mga cis-heterosexual families, regardless kung ano pa man yung pagkatao mo or kung ano ka.
Where is home now? Para sa'yo?
I'm home. I'm in the Netherlands. Ngayong halalan, kailangan nating isipin yung mga kapatid nating queer, trans, intersex na mga doktor, nurses, bakers, kapatid natin mga karaniwang tao na miyembro ng LGBT bago bumoto. Ito ako, babae, lumalaban.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Filipino Queer Forum. And today, I'm your co-host. I'm Radem Musawa. I'm a filmmaker and human rights activist here in the Philippines. And my fellow co-host is the GMA News media correspondent, Sophia. Sophia?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Radem, for that introduction. Today, we will be talking about the SOGIE bill, especially how it is related with the upcoming elections in the Philippines and how relevant it is during these moments of crucial voting for our rights, our human rights. Um, Actually, today, Redem, we are both actually in the Philippines, but we are joined together with a lot of people from different time zones. So we are joined from people in the Netherlands, I think, correct? Also in the US.
Yes. And
Yes.
also in the US and here in the Philippines, and bringing all these people who could contribute to the movement, and hopefully will be able to give an insight on what we can do and how can we really create a safer and inclusive Philippines, especially in this coming
Mm,
election. So,
yes.
but before we proceed, I also wanted to what you call it, recognize first our partners and sponsors for this event. So thank you so much for the Kingdom of Netherlands, the Netherlands Embassy in the Philippines, Commission on Human Rights Philippines, ASEAN SOGIE Caucus, Mujer-LGBT, the Red Whistle, and of course, our main organizer is the Filipino LGBT Europe, and our co-sponsor for this stream is the Asbury of A Space. Thank you so much, A Space Manila, for the stream. And yeah, so Sophia,
Yes.
shall we
And for
proceed to the
also
next one?
Yes, and for those who have just tuned in, we would like to invite you to, of course, share this important forum on your social media. It can be found on the Filipino LGBT Europe page, and we hope to see you there and encourage more people to join our forum for today. So now, before we start our forum, I would like to introduce a special guest who will be gracing us with the welcoming remarks, Mr. Ambassador. J. Eduardo Malaya. Um, J. Eduardo Malaya commenced his diplomatic assignment in the Netherlands in April 2021 upon the presentation of his credentials to King Willem Alexander. Ambassador Malaya was Undersecretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs from 2019 to March 2021 and Assistant Secretary to Treaties and Legal Affairs from 2017 to 2019. He was ambassador to Malaysia from 2011 to 2017 and foreign affairs spokesman from 2009 to 2011. The author and editor of 9 books on international law, diplomacy, and history, Malaya is also the vice president of the Philippine Society of International Law and a member of editorial board of the Philippine Yearbook of International Law. He was bestowed the title of Datu in the Order of Sikatuna by President Gloria Arroyo in 2010 and rank of Dakilang Kamanong in the Order of Mabini or Gawad Mabini by President Benigno Aquino III in 2016. The Congress of the Philippines commended him through the House Resolution number 34 dated 25 of January 2017 for his proactive work, community outreach, and leadership as the Philippine ambassador to Malaysia. He received the Distinguished Alumnus Award for Public Service and Diplomacy from the University of the Philippines in 2018. So let's welcome Ambassador Jay Eduardo Malaya, who will be giving us our opening remarks. Sir?
Ah, Maraming salamat, Sophia, for that very generous introduction. It is the kind that would make my mother blush. Congresswoman Geraldine Roman, Director Ladra, certainly our embassy's friend, Peter Terpspa, Chris and Brigida, friends, colleagues, mahal kong mga kababayan, depending on the time zone, certainly. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and wherever you are, certainly a wholehearted welcome. I wish to thank the organizers for this opportunity to address this important forum on fostering a safer and inclusive Philippines, and certainly our commendation to the organizers for taking this important initiative. As the intro video has shown, our event today is most timely because we mark also yesterday Human Rights Day, specifically the 73rd anniversary of the promulgation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN General Assembly on December 10, 1948. Coincidentally, 2 days ago, the embassy hosted an online forum on women's rights as part of the annual 18-day campaign to end violence against women. The VAW campaign, which was started in the Philippines in 2001. And today's forum, in my view, find inspiration in the international campaign against gender-based violence, which is observed internationally from November 25 to December 10. And well, what are human rights? As the video also have underscored, it is at its core the rights that we all have because we are all human beings, and these rights are certainly universal. We do not need to belong to any nationality, group, sex, religion, income bracket, or any other category to be able to be entitled to it. But notwithstanding these supposed guaranteed rights, many are still deprived of it and continually experience violence and discrimination, notably because of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression the world over. The Philippines and our overseas Filipino communities are no exceptions. And the LGBTQIA plus in the Philippines and elsewhere continue to confront many challenges. While the Philippines is generally accepting of the members of the LGBTQIA plus community, there's certainly a lot to be done. Our forum will examine this situation as well as discuss proposed measures towards a safer and more inclusive Philippines. We are fortunate to have at this event trailblazers, movers, and shakers who have not merely challenged discriminatory norms but also have undertaken the necessary and often difficult steps to make change happen in our community. This includes the Honorable Geraldine Roman, before whose Congressional Veterans Committee which he chairs. I have appeared a number of times in the past as representative of the DFA. Let me close by making a special mention of the Filipino LGBT Europe and its very proactive members who are truly champions of inclusion as well of humanity. The embassy previously commended their humanitarian initiatives and programs in extending assistance to those who are facing hard times in Amsterdam at this time of pandemic. The impact of their Ayuda program is significant. It also sends out a clear message to the world that given a platform and a safe space, an empowered LGBTQIA plus are doing so much for our communities and for our countries. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pakikinig. Thank you well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Your Excellency Eduardo Malaya, the Philippine Ambassador to the Netherlands. So thank you so much po. So, Sophia, nakamute ka yata, Sophia. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Yeah.
There you
Sorry.
go. So, why are we doing this, or why did we initiate this Filipino Queer Forum?
Yeah,
What
that's
is
a
this?
very Yes, that's a very interesting question, Radem, no? Because it's bakit nga ba, no? That's the question today that we hope to answer. And why are we doing this? And what is the purpose of our activity? As elections is nearing, as you well see, no?
Oh yeah, I
Grabe, di
can
ba?
feel it in the air.
Yeah, totoo yan. It's with all the campaign trails and everyone really, like really looking at their candidates, who to vote, which party to support or represent. It's very crucial that we ask ourselves, do these candidates and do these party lists actually represent our own beliefs and our own things that we stand by. And as elections is nearing, this is a timely opportunity to remind our fellow Filipinos to cast their votes wisely for public representatives who represent and fight for the causes of the Filipino LGBT community. So yun talaga yung purpose nitong activity na to. And we want to highlight some of the salient issues that the SOGIE bill addresses. And these are, of course, as we know, the gender equality, inclusivity, and safeguarding as well the safety of Filipino LGBTs in the Philippines.
And also, this forum as well will give us an insight or idea on how the international community can contribute in making
Yeah.
that change.
Yes.
We have a lot of member of the panelists who's been doing active work in the international community and doing so much for the movement here in the Philippines.
Yes.
And we are so thankful with them, but we need more and more leaders like them to come together to really fight for this
Yes.
project equality bill, and also be critical on those people who would really vote for somebody who would choose us, who would choose everyone, not just cherry picking who gets the human rights. So we
Yes.
should always be wary on those kind of,
Mm-hmm.
especially now in the election is coming.
Mm-hmm.
So our panelists will give us an insight on those ideas, like what you mentioned. So we're gonna be starting from the global perspective, then we go to the regional, and we go to the local, which is the Philippines.
Yes.
Uh, so yes, shall we start and introduce our panelists, or
Yes.
do
Please
we
take it
need
away,
to
Radem.
mention something? No.
Yes. Yeah, I think we could start by introducing our set of panelists today. Yes, Radem, take it away.
Okay. So, one of our amazing and dashing panelists is none other than Congresswoman Geraldine Roman, the Bataan First District Representative, and one of the equality champ in the Philippines who's been fighting so hard for the SOGIE equality bill in the lower house. So thank you so much, Congressman Jardine Roman, for being part and joining this Filipino Queer Forum. And our next panelist would be our dearest friend, Aaron Winston Lefebvre. He's the Deputy Director of Global Equality Caucus. He's also the former Director on Human Rights for World Pride. The next one is, of course, the amazing Chris Santa Brigida, who's been doing a lot of LGBT programs and LGBT work in the Netherlands and in partnership also with the embassy. He is the chairperson of Filipino LGBT Europe. The next one is one of our ally in ASEAN, which is Association of Southeast Asian Nation, Ryan Silverio, which is the executive director of ASEAN SOGIE Caucus, who's been doing a lot of tremendous work when it comes to LGBT inclusive movement, like inclusive equality in the ASEAN region. So thank you so much, Ryan, for gracing us with your presence today for the Filipino Queer Forum. So the next one is Director Esmeralda Amora Ladra. She is the Director and Gender and Development Director Focal Person of Commission on Elections here in the Philippines. So she will be giving us insight on the election issues. So hopefully we'll be able to learn so much from her. And the next one, which is unfortunately, Attorney Twyla Rubin of CHR won't be able to be with us today because she has an emergency. But she have sent her message of support for this forum. And thank you so much, Attorney Twyla Rubin, for supporting the SOGIE Forward campaign through the CHR. Thank you so much. And yeah, so that's our set of panelists who's been doing a lot of tremendous work when it comes to gender equality movement here in the Philippines, and also in timely for the for the celebration of Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which is Human Rights Day yesterday. So I'll give the floor to you, Sophia, to engage with our panelists and hopefully start the conversation with a meaningful and also a productive and also at the same time fun and enjoyable and also empowering discussion for the Filipino Queer Forum.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you,
Sophia,
Rodem.
see
Okay.
you.
Thanks. All right, everyone. We're going to start with a panel discussion now, and thank you, Redem, for that introduction. Um, Actually, I wanted to first go international and wanted to explore a bit on the importance of this particular forum in relation to the World Human Rights Day, which we just commemorated yesterday. It is, of course, an important reminder that the fight for human rights and equality is still not over. And it is an opportunity to once again reflect on the importance of recognizing the LGBT rights as human rights. So I wanted to ask this actually to Aaron as well as Twyla. Maybe you have some insights on why it is important to discuss about LGBT rights in relation to human rights. And yeah, because this is we are always talking about human rights, but why is it so difficult also, or why is it a challenge to always link or have that link between LGBT rights and human rights? And what is the importance of um, recognizing this?
Shall I go first? Yes,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Um, well, if we're talking from an international perspective, and I mean the UN has already been mentioned, the right to exist is a human right. I mean we don't ask for anything more than be seen, be able to love who we want to love, and to be who we want to be. And
Mhm.
if we don't connect this to human rights, we lose a lot of the essence of what we're actually asking for, because we are asking for nothing more than any other person that does not fall within our community normally is entitled to. This person has. And I think this is it is very important to approach this from an international level, because our community is very big. We have community members everywhere. We need to stand strong, not only our community, but also our allies. And I also think when we look at an international level, there's a lot of best practices and a lot of support we can gain from all these community members we have all over the world. Now, I mean, I met Chris a couple of weeks ago. He's doing a fantastic job in the Netherlands, and I have to applaud the organization for that, because it is really important to make sure that all our parts of the community all over the world are being visible, and that we know that they exist. I mean, we have a fantastic Filipino community in the Netherlands, a very strong Filipino community, and also there you see this international level. Human rights don't end at the border of the country you're living in. They're universal human rights. They are basically the rights of everybody, and everybody is entitled to be who they want to be, or to love who they want to love. So I think in that respect, it is always really important to approach this from an international perspective, because we have to fight for these rights in every single country, but we are entitled to them on an international level.
Yes. Thank you very much, Aaron. Indeed, that's a very important note you mentioned, that it's a human rights is a universal right. And I wanted to shed some particular focus on the situation in the local scenario. It's a pity that Ma'am Tuaila is not here at the moment to discuss about human rights linked to the LGBT rights in the Philippines, but maybe some of our Filipino correspondents can gives maybe a context on what is happening in the Filipino community in relation to the human rights at the moment. So, are there, for example, still challenges that we experience? In relation to upholding the human rights of LGBT community, and yeah, maybe someone from the
Yes,
Filipino,
may
yes,
I?
yes.
Yes, as a member of the Philippine Congress, I would just like to point out, first of all, that it is important to discuss LGBT rights in the context
Mm-hmm.
of human rights, because um, what happens in countries like the Philippines, which defines itself as largely conservative,
Yeah.
uh, the condition of being LGBTQIA plus is very controversial. And to be specific, some sectors, the conservative ones, do not accept that there should be, and there are people who are born LGBTQIA, and therefore they attach a moral judgment to this
Mm-hmm.
condition, and they sincerely believe that members of our community, the LGBTQIA community, do not deserve
Mm-hmm.
human rights. For example, the basic right to study or to work are not recognized if you are transgender. And
Yep.
they would often say that, no, you have to change your being before you
Mm-hmm.
are able to avail of these rights. Now, as to your question, how many cases and to what extent is there discrimination in Philippine society?
Yep.
Yes, there is discrimination, not as widespread as before, thank God, and thanks to the advances we have made as a society. But legally speaking, we do not have concrete laws that will protect members of the LGBT community, because the concepts of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression have only been recently introduced in
Mm-hmm.
Philippine legislation. To date, we only have two laws that actually define what sexual orientation and gender identity and expression are. And if mainstream society does not understand what these concepts are, they can hardly report what the cases of discrimination are. Because,
Mm-hmm.
for example, to date, there are 50 reported cases since 2010 of murders and hate crimes committed against members of the LGBTQIA community. But
Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe that there should be more. No, not there should be more, rather, that there are more,
Or more.
in fact. But they are not properly reported because, members of the police force or our local executives do not view these crimes as hate crimes
Mm-hmm.
or acts of discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. They view these incidents as simple crimes. So we cannot properly report if we do not have the laws that will actually define what these cases of discrimination are. But in general, we are improving as a society. The younger generations are learning from the examples of other countries that it is possible to have an inclusive and a diverse society, as um, is the case in Europe and the United States and other Asian countries, and that the sun continues to shine in these countries, unlike what the doomsday prophets of in the Philippines would predict. So there you have it, the situation of discrimination in the Philippines.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Congressman, for that very enlightening talk, because I think it's quite, it's such a painful truth to, to really accept that there are still so many gaps, and if before we can legally recognize these rights, we need to put
Yes,
it in law,
Sophia, you may refer to me as representative or
Yes.
congresswoman.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. I'm sorry for that. Yeah, thank you for that correction. That is very important, actually. Yes. For other speakers, maybe you wanted to also shed some light as well on this particular issue.
Uh, I can you hear me? Yes. Yes. Well, thank you very much, Sophia. We are gathered today because of yesterday we've celebrated or commemorated the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was done. We have to remember that this was done because we just exited 2 world wars, and a lot of atrocities happen, and human rights needs to be protected. And after this, on the European perspective, the European countries basically created a European Convention on Human Rights on 1953, where it also not just recognized the Human Rights Declaration, but also created courts to hear and listen to individuals, so that if their rights are not protected or upheld by countries, they can go to the European court to challenge the state. So this is one of the things that was also important, to have a ika nga in the Philippines, to have a ngipin o pangil sa batas, o when we created a law, we need, because the declaration is just a declaration that we intended. So that's why it is important to have a SOGIE law in the Philippines, to make it into writing, to make it a little bit more powerful.
And yes, indeed, Chris, that's a very important note that you mentioned, because the international community is also a huge part of this movement. And maybe we wanted to explore from the international level down to the regional level and then to the local level on the importance of the SOGIE bill. And maybe, Chris, because you represent also the European side, can you tell us what is the role of the international community in the passage of the SOGIE bill in the Philippines? And as you know, you're already doing efforts to be able for Filipino LGBTs in Europe to thrive as well. And but can you tell me about what's the particular role of the international community in making the Filipino LGBT voices heard, especially in Europe as well and towards the Philippines?
For me, I think there are two major things that the Filipino international community could do. One is, well, there are still the strong interest of Filipinos to be part of the development in the Philippines. This is demonstrated by our monthly remittances back home, our constant visiting to the Philippines, and probably potentially we would retire back in the Philippines. So there is still a strong interest of Filipinos living overseas. Despite of our distance, we still call Philippines, despite that we live in Europe or in America for a very long time, we still call Philippines as our home. So we have a strong interest in the development and the safeguard by creating laws that would affect our family back home. Second, I think the second contribution that the international community or Filipino international community could do is to send a strong solidarity, a message of solidarity to the Filipino fight of gender equality in the Philippines. I think these are the two major aspects that we could do. To remind Filipinos overseas that we have a strong interest still in what's going on in the Philippines, and to keep on sending solidarity message to the fight in the Philippines.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And I wanted to ask also, Ryan, in terms of the regional perspective of the ASEAN, is this also what you feel the role of the ASEAN community is? And can you expound on it as well?
Sure, Sophia. ASEAN is a very problematic and an extremely challenging space for LGBTIQ human rights advocacy. I mean, broadly, in terms of human rights, you've got several countries with authoritarian regimes, with a military junta, plus a prevailing culture of conservatism fueled by political support for right-wing extremist conservative perspectives. And we can see in Southeast Asia that mostly governments try to divide the population to the majority and the minority, and they always say LGBT people are always in the minority, and as such that we cannot we cannot come up with policies that would go beyond the interests of the majority. And many governments like Malaysia, Singapore, even Thailand have uttered the same discourse, and putting LGBT rights, LGBT persons within the minority status. And then this is reflected as well within the regional political spaces. The problem with ASEAN is that it decides based on consensus. And if one or two countries would set aside a particular sensitive matter, including LGBT rights, nothing will move forward. Let me share one example. A couple of years back, our organization, ASEAN SOGIE Caucus, tried to get an accreditation status within the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. I think we were the first LGBT human rights organization to apply. Many human rights groups have applied and they got it. When we applied, many ASEAN officials, many representatives of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights supported their cause. I don't want to name the countries because it's quite sensitive, but one particular country vetoed our application, which is Brunei. And because of that, we didn't get the accreditation status. That's how crucial things are. When the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration was being deliberated way back in 2012, there were countries that were kind of open to include sexual orientation, gender identity as some of the protected categories in the non-discrimination clause. But then again, countries like Malaysia and Brunei raised several concerns. And then, of course, nothing happened again. That's why we always have to keep pushing for LGBT rights within the broader human rights agenda. I know this is very problematic at this time because there's also a growing movement to question the so-called gender ideology that LGBTI trans activists are trying to change the way how we interpret gender, and that we are putting forward a new way of thinking that is not in accordance with natural law, not in accordance with how things should be, man, woman, the gender binary system. And this anti-gender movement is gaining ground, getting lots of supports coming from countries like Russia, China, name it. And these are also the countries who have vehemently opposed LGBT rights within the UN spaces. So I think for us at the local level, we have to continue to push through education, through legislation, and through cultural advocacy.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ryan, for that message. Actually, I wanted to ask you because you mentioned earlier that, well, for example, some countries are giving their support to the movement of the LGBT. Some other countries, for example, they veto against it, or they give their no to your particular cause. But my question is, with the different intercultural practices as well as beliefs across countries, especially in the Asia region as well. Is there a way that we can find a collaboration, or like a sense of how can we actually achieve this, one goal or sense of unity? Because as we have been constantly mentioned in this particular discussion, that solidarity is key from the international community if you want to push this forward, and therefore actually also put some pressure in local governments to also enact international laws that are abided by certain countries as well. So maybe also some of our panelists have also ideas on how we can better engage governments into having this kind of solidarity.
What is the question? How could we better engage governments
Yes,
into
exactly. If
supporting
yes, because
anti-discrimination measures
yes.
when it comes to policy, whether in local ordinances or national laws? Well, basically, number one, I believe that the LGBT community has to be united. You know, we are politicians. We only listen
Mm.
to lobby groups and groups that represent votes. That is
Okay.
how a politician would normally think. So unless the LGBT community in the Philippines at least gets its act together and presents itself as a united force to reckon with, we can hardly make any, we can hardly exert any pressure on politicians, in particular lawmakers and local executives, to pass and enact anti-discrimination measures. So with regard to the SOGIE Equality Bill here in the Philippines, and this is how it should be addressed, not just the SOGIE Bill, but the SOGIE Equality Bill, because we want to emphasize the fact that it is an anti-discrimination law that we are
Okay.
pushing for. The challenges have varied over the different congresses depending on the composition of the Congress and depending on the who is of the power on the powers that be. If you have a conservative House leadership, you can hardly advance the SOGIE Equality Bill. But what happened in the 17th Congress, we're now in the 18th Congress here in the Philippines, we had a fairly liberal House leadership, and we were able to pass it at the lower house. But the Senate, which is presided over by a very conservative senator, it did not prosper. So we're back to square one. But the good news is that we here in the lower house in the 18th Congress, which is the present Congress, we have been able to pass a comprehensive anti-discrimination bill, not solely on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, but also on the basis of age,
Okay.
gender, sex, ethnicity, religion, health status, physical appearance, and sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. The road to the passage of this comprehensive anti-discrimination bill was not an easy one because there were consistent efforts to eliminate sexual orientation and gender identity and expression as a protected attribute, meaning as a basis for discrimination. Of course, I had to fight my way into retaining SOGIE as a protected attribute. So basically, I think, my colleagues at the House of Representatives believe that a comprehensive anti-discrimination bill would be more saleable, would be more palatable to our counterparts in the Senate, because one of the accusations that was hurled against the SOGIE Equality Bill was that it was an attempt by the LGBTQIA community to earn more privileges, by having a special law that would protect just the community, in complete disregard of the fact that everyone, including straight people, have sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. So this is the situation here in the Philippines. As I said, the LGBTQIA community has to unite, has to set aside their political differences because no one can have a monopoly of LGBT rights, whether
Right.
you are pro or against the administration. And I know that somebody there will be raising his or her hand in favor of the intersectionality of human rights. But you seem to forget that we legislators are basically politicians, and we
Yep.
have to compartmentalize our fight. In
Mm.
this case, we're talking about the SOGIE Equality Bill. Yes, we have to compartmentalize LGBT rights in this sense, which is not to say that I do not believe in the intersectionality of human rights. I do believe in the importance of all human rights. The thing is that we have to deal with them on a case-to-case basis, and that I'm fully cognizant of the fact that we don't live in a perfect world. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Representative, for that update as well on the status of the SOGIE Equality Bill. So that's also a good reminder for everyone not to actually recognize the SOGIE Equality Bill with the equality in it, because we wanted to give that message that it is actually for everyone. It's not something that is in favor of only a particular group, but is actually everyone, regardless of age, gender, or your identity. You are part of this bill, and you are actually protected by this bill. Maybe Aaron, lastly, you have something in mind about um, the current measures, or current things that are actually now being done to unite the front of the LGBT, in terms of the passage of the SOGIE Equality Bill, or promoting anti-discrimination laws.
Well, I first want to recognize what Congresswoman Roman just said. I do think we in some way do have a problem when it comes to uniting ourselves.
Yeah.
And now I heard countries like Russia and China, but let's not forget that also in the UK and the Netherlands we see more and more opposition against our community, but also within our community. And this is this whole point of uniting. I think the most important aspect for the years to come is making sure that our community is acting in a united front. I mean, if we are not, if we're divided, we will not be able to push for more inclusion on a global level, but we will also see laws being rolled back in countries that initially did pass all these laws. And I think this is something very important to just keep in mind, because sometimes we forget that we need to move forward as a community, that we need to move forward as people, and we are too much focused on getting laws passed, forgetting that there is a bigger and bigger opposition. I mean, even here in the United States, or even I should say here in the United States, it's also getting more and more difficult. I mean, there's religious groups attacking us. There is people from within our community attacking us. I mean, we have the TERFs that are very much trying to exclude transgender communities. So I think that is one of these elements to really focus on when it comes to push for more inclusion. Look around you and see how we can include as many people as possible. We need to have a dialogue, but we also need to stand strong against all these communities that are against our existence. Now, I'm very happy that my home country, my native country, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, is providing a platform internationally to work with the LGBTI community, making sure that the values we see as extremely important, these inclusion values, are not only kept for our own country, but are also very much promoted in other countries, always, and that is very important, always in collaboration with the community of the country itself. Because an issue is as well that as soon as there's the perception that it's foreign countries pushing certain elements onto communities in other countries, it will only have an effect of backlash. And I think that is one of these very important international elements as well. So I will leave it there, because I know that there's also the very important local element, and I want to also give some time to other people.
All right. Thank
Sophia.
you, Aaron. Yes.
Yes, it's rather disturbing to hear that in the United States there's a growing number of lobby groups who are trying to reverse the advances that have been made when it comes to LGBT rights. And I say this because, here here in the Philippines, at least in developing countries that define themselves as quite conservative, we look to the example of the United States as well as Europe. And the problem is when people try to weaponize religion and use it against LGBT rights and the human rights of members of the LGBT community. And this is how we deal with it, at least in Philippine Congress. And I'm not about to give you a lesson or lecture you on what should be done in the United States. But when people try to weaponize religion, I always have to remind my colleagues that we are in an institution that recognizes the separation between the church and the state. And any kind of religious discussion, really, it could be interesting, but it's irrelevant, you see. And we can, I also have to remind them that these are two reconcilable things, the freedom of religion and as well as the freedom to be what we truly are and to love the people that we truly love. So it's just reminding people and my fellow legislators of our job, which is to legislate laws to protect human rights and not to moralize or to define what a sin is or not. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's a very important point you mentioned about, teaching what is moral and not, and also combining that element within the space of legal discussion. I think indeed there is a need for that to be indeed separated as well as discussed as well. I think for now that we have established that the international community and solidarity, not just in the Philippines, but also in the ASEAN region, but also internationally. So we look in Europe and um, um, as we have mentioned also in the US, we want to move forward to the local discussion. I think this is quite an interesting discussion, which ma'am from the COMELEC will be gracing us with some insights with. But before we do that, we can pause for a short break. Also grab your some water and then we can pause for a break with them.
I used to live in London, where I did my studies, and then I worked there. Then I met David there, my husband. I moved to the Netherlands to freedom, to be myself. It's more open. LGBT rights, civil and political rights have been achieved here already in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands. In a way na the government is protecting you, that you are not afraid of becoming or who you are, na kung mabugbog ka dyan, the police will take you seriously. I wanted also to experience yung living in a community wherein when you're accepted and you're also liberated. Yan, ganyan ang buhay ko dito sa Europe. Luto. I'm the chef in the house. I love cooking. Hindi ganun kadali ang maging bakla sa Pilipinas. Kasi alam mo yung before, I always have to be careful na parang kailangan ko isipin, am I masculine enough? Nakapagod magpanggap. Nararamdaman mo ibang tingin sa'yo ng tao.
na parang they don't see you as a person. Masakit kasi una't una, hindi ko patanggap na bakla ako noon eh. Paano kaya ang kinabukasan ko bilang bakla sa Pilipinas? Pwede kaya akong magpamilya? For many years, I was trying to pray na please take this away from me. That's why I decided to study overseas. I wanted to be the best that I could be. Hindi naman privilege yung nakalasulat dun sa SOGIE. Ang privilege, hindi siya privilege. It's just making sure that they have the same equal treatment as everybody else. That they get that to ensure that the public services offered by the government is also being offered to them. So this is our breakfast, lunch-ish.
Nakakalungkot kasi paulit-ulit na sinasalang sa Kongreso, paulit-ulit na sinasalang sa Senado, maraming pangakong nabibitiwan, pero hanggang doon lang tayo hanggang ngayon. SOGIE Equality Bill in the Philippines is very important kasi it is the responsibility and duty of the state protektahan ang kapakanan ng bawat isa. Bata, matanda, mga minority, lalo-lalo na minority. Yun ang isa sa may pinaka-importanting dahilan kung bakit kailangan meron tayong anti-discrimination bill. Alam mo, ang mga Pilipino ay natural na mapagmahal. Sana, ang pagbubukas ng loob natin, sana iparamdam din natin yung pag-ibig na ito sa lahat ng miyembro ng komunidad. Nabigyan ng pugay yung ating mga volunteers sa ayuda sa cancer. Kaya na tayo! Isang bagsak naman!
Mabuhay ang LGBT community sa buong mundo! Mabuhay ang ating kalayaan! Mabuhay ang Pilipinas!
Gawin po nating mas ligtas ang Pilipinas para sa lahat ngayong halalan.
Yes. Chris, bidang-bida ka doon. Yeah, that was a very inspiring video, and it's very nice to just reminisce also the Amsterdam Gay Pride that we were I'm also there, dancing. So it's very beautiful event. Yes, so now I think we would go to a very important part of our discussion today, which is the discussion on the local relation of the SOGIE Equality Bill, and also with the upcoming elections. It is very important to discuss, especially now that we want to engage more politicians into the discussion as well, and also in a way also educate and also engage our electorate regarding the SOGIE Equality Bill. Yes, maybe we can start with because already we have given already a background on the status of the SOGIE Equality Bill, and indeed, as our representative has mentioned, it has been a very controversial issues, and and it has met many challenges in the Senate as well as in the Congress. and it will continue to become a very controversial issues even without actually an ongoing election period. And my question maybe to the panelists is, do you think this is an issue that many of our political candidates in the Philippines will touch on, or try to avoid, especially now with the current climate of, the pandemic, as well as, more people becoming really engaged about their religion, as well as their moral beliefs as well. Um, and if our politicians do not engage with it, how can we better engage them into the discussion? Maybe we can start with our representative. Yes.
Straight from the horse's mouth.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the issue of LGBT rights is always a main issue that is always discussed when presidential elections come. It's always part of the debate, especially when it comes to choosing the president of our country. So yes, it is going to be discussed. Maybe it will not have as much importance as economic recovery in the post-pandemic period, or the development of agriculture, the generation of jobs, etc., etc. But yes, rest assured that it will be discussed. Now, if these politicians do not want to discuss this issue, it depends on our journalists to raise the question, as well as the public, and especially members of the LGBT community, to ask their local candidates, their candidates for members of the House of Representatives, what their stand is with regard to LGBT rights. And you know what? I guess that it also depends on media to to put some visibility, to extend some visibility to LGBT rights. I know that during the pandemic, LGBT rights has taken the background, and has also been trivialized, and but it really depends on media as well as the community to uh, to pressure our politicians to at least explain what their stands are with regard to LGBT rights. There you have it.
Yes. Thank you very much. Indeed, it's quite a long way to go. And as you mentioned, the media is a really huge part of the discussion as well. And we hope that through this forum, that this discussion that we are actually having right now, that we get to get the discussion going. Um, to Ma'am Esmeralda, maybe also you can briefly also discuss about actually the situation now, especially with the upcoming elections as well. And do we actually have do we actually consider like people who are getting voted, the LGBT community being voted, are they actually being accounted for, or is it something that to be being noted or being taken consideration for?
Actually, I have
Mm-hmm.
to greet everyone, no?
All right.
Happy good day and advance Merry Christmas. But I'd just like to emphasize in the commission, our strategic plan is very much important to us, and our strategic plan for 2017 to 2022 has a very good mission statement, which of course is very much related to the subject matter. And the statement of our mission statement goes this way: as
Mm-hmm.
vanguards of democracy, we conduct free, orderly, honest, peaceful, credible, gender responsive, and socially inclusive elections in active partnership with our election stakeholders. So being gender responsive includes, and socially inclusive includes, of course, the LGBTQA community. And we don't even have, as of this time, honestly speaking, as of we talk now, we just had also our webinar, which the Gender and Development God Focal Point system has conducted in
Mm-hmm.
November on November 29 this year, about understanding and acceptance, a webinar on the rights of LGBTQA plus, and we would like to emphasize the fact that results, and remember that equality benefits everyone. So
Mhm.
hindi po kami nag-discriminate insofar as the rights of suffrage is concerned. We want to be equal, giving equal rights to all, male, female, SOGIE, whatever may be your gender identity or
Mhm.
expression is. And in fact, this is very much clear manifestly by our very own Congresswoman Roman, who is here with us now, na-elect po siya because COMELEC cannot just discriminate any gender for purposes of elections. No voter
Mhm.
shall be discriminated, uh, or no candidate or anyone who is aspiring to
Mhm.
be candidate shall be discriminated just because of the gender expression or
Mhm.
identity that he wants to manifest. So open po kami niyan, and although in our forms, honestly speaking also, we only have male and female na pwede mong i-take. Wala pa yung ating LGBTQA community doon.
Okay. Mhm.
So, wala po tayong insofar as our right of suffrage is concerned, and insofar as
Mhm.
is concerned, uh, we want to understand what are those services that we can give to the community, and
Mhm.
we want to know more about it, and especially siguro we would like to have candidates siguro then who will have platforms for this community, as we also want women empowerment. We also want empowerment to all who want to exercise the right of suffrage, both right to vote and be voted for.
Okay. And is that something, ma'am, that is currently, because you mentioned, wala pa siya, there is nothing there that indicates about the LGBT identity. Is that something that the COMELEC now is trying to, I don't know, explore or give attention to? And as you mentioned earlier, just a follow-up question, no, in regards to the recognition, for example, of the women representation in the Congress or in the Philippine government, is there also like sort of like a tracking, um how many are LGBTs, and actually are they represented, no, in the upper and lower house as well? Because it's also the number of people who are representing the LGBT movement are actually also quite telling on the kind of system, the political system that we have. Meron po ba ganun, ma'am?
May I just say something with regard
Sige
to
po,
this
ma'am.
tracking that you're speaking
Apo.
of?
Yes.
You can hardly track anything with regard to the sexual orientation or gender identity as an expression of individuals,
Mm.
including members of the upper house or the lower house, because these are very personal matters. Unless they come out in the open and openly
Mm.
say that they are LGBTQIA, we cannot
Mhm.
uh, make conclusions. In fact, part
Mhm.
of the social equality bill is that it's illegal to out someone without that person's consent.
Mhm.
Uh, so that is the difficulty with regard to what our Comelec representative said as to recognizing male and female candidates.
Mhm.
Uh, well, the time may come, and I hope it will be soon that we will be able to recognize trans people through a gender recognition law. Uh, People who are trans in the United States or in Europe are able to avail of a change, legal change in their gender markers. So they can file for candidacies either as male or as female, and the identity that they are comfortable with. So that is the situation in the Philippines. We do not have a gender recognition law, and in my humble opinion, that is a concept that is quite difficult to sell at this moment. You
Yeah.
know, that's the
Mm.
reason why we start first with the SOGIE Equality Bill, which is just basic human rights. The right
Mm.
to study, the right to work, the right to avail of government services, the right to use public facilities and accommodations, before venturing into concepts such as marriage equality or gender recognition. Thank you,
Mhm.
Sophia.
Thank you so much. Yes, because also we are running behind our time. Maybe just a final question to everyone as well. Um, also considering the upcoming elections. No, our representative already touched a bit about how we can engage, how we can better engage our politicians and our electorate as well in terms of um, understanding, and also giving support to the SOGIE equality bill. Maybe you also have like a final message of what we can do, especially in our own areas of expertise, and also our advice to the Filipino community, not just in the Philippines, but also in the international community, how we can actually push forward to create a safer and inclusive Philippines, and hopefully also keep the discussion for the SOGI equality bill going. Yes, maybe we can start with some of our final um, messages and reminders from our panelists.
May I
Can I
just
start?
start?
Ah, sige po.
Yes, yes, ma'am, please.
Because I have to
Sorry.
catch up with another commitment
Sige
in
po.
approximately 10 minutes.
Thank
My
you.
message basically to our Filipino voters, in particular members of the LGBT community, is that it is time for us to unite and exert our and express our voice. Um, we should ask our candidates if they support LGBT rights or not. Now, as to whether that will tip the balance in favor of one candidate or another is another question. And also to to ask our politicians to support the social equality bill in Congress, or our local executives to to pass and enact anti-discrimination ordinances in our different local government units. And this is my message to my fellow legislators as well as officials of our country. Really, you just have to look at the example of United States, Europe, and other developed countries in Asia, and see that recognizing LGBT rights will in no way work against the development of our country. In fact, it will favor, we have everything to gain by aspiring for a more inclusive and diverse society. So there is nothing to fear. And I would also like to remind my fellow officials that there is separation between the church and the state. We should live and let others live, and be happy and let others be happy. So there you have it. Please support the Social Equality Bill, and I'd like to thank my fellow panelists as well for sharing their points of view with me, and thank you very much to the organizers of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Sige po, Director Esmeralda.
Yeah, of course, we in COMELEC also supported the gender or SOGIE equality bill. We participated in the discussion during the time that it was put on the table. And we would also like to let people understand that Comisa COMELEC, we in COMELEC have given an equal access and equal opportunity for any and all people who have the right to vote and qualified to vote and be voted for, not regarding whether whatever their gender is. So we make sure that, as we have said, gender responsiveness is true not only to our mission statement but also in our daily works as an election management body. And we would like to belong to these countries that give also equal opportunity and expression to all those kind of people who are living in the respective and even in overseas, no, Filipino overseas can even vote. And just like persons deprived of liberty, we would like also to give gender the best opportunity that we can give. So we want a deeper understanding and knowledge on the rights of LGBTQ, and of course how we can serve them well, better, and improve our services to them, just like any other gender as voters and candidates. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ryan, perhaps?
Sure. Yes. Okay. Early this year, I think it was sometime June, there's a statement released by more than 50 LGBTI organizations and individual activists listing down the key questions that we wish to ask to politicians running in this upcoming election. So questions like, what is your position on the SOGIE Equality Bill, on the Anti-Discrimination Bill, on local ordinances, on legal gender recognition, on just wages for LGBTI persons, on improving access to education amongst LGBTI young persons. So these lists of questions will serve as a guide in our constant engagement within the electoral process. So that's the first one. Second thing is that we look at election as a very important element of the democratic process. Of course, it's very ideal that more and more LGBTI persons are visible enough in running for public office, and I think I'm hopeful that if you can see more groups bonding together, filing for candidacies in the party list elections. There are LGBTI activists who are also looking for potential positions at the local government level, up down to the barangay, down to the SK. These are very important positions to seize. But at the same time, let's not be stuck on gaining this very important indicator of LGBTI representation in public office, because we have to look at democracy in a very complex and comprehensive space. There is civil society, there are volunteer organizations, there are humanitarian groups who are and humanitarian work where LGBTI activists, LGBTI individuals are so active enough in providing resources, mobilizing support with regards to the negative impact of COVID-19 on and so many complex emergencies that the country is facing. Let's also recognize the contributions of LGBTI individuals in this complex and comprehensive democratic space. And I think, again, we talk about LGBT rights as a human rights as if it is already a given. We look at the country as if it's already open. We are still in a negotiating process with broader society. Not many folks understand what SOGIE is. Not many folks already accept LGBT rights. Our constant conversations with our parents, family members, community members, all of these are very important in transforming our norms to make these inclusive for all persons of diverse SOGIE. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aaron, maybe?
I just want to keep it very short. I think what is most important from the international level is keep on collaborating and keep on looking for meaningful collaborations in order to push governments to legislate for the inclusion of LGBTI people, and you need everybody to do so, LGBTI community members and allies alike, and make sure that everybody is included in this fight for equality.
Thank you very much. And lastly, our Filipino LGBT Europe. Yes, Chris, you're on mute. Yes.
Yes. Hi. I am very happy that Ryan mentioned the petition letter that we've submitted. Actually, the Filipino LGBT Europe co-signed the letter. This is a good starting point where we could look at on what kind of questions we could ask our politicians. And I'm very supportive of what Congresswoman Geraldine Ruman said as well. Let us start engaging our politician, us, and start the dialogue. We are member of the community. We exist in the community, and just ask our politicians about how our situation, our right. So in behalf of the Filipino LGBT Europe, I just would like to say thank you very much as well to all the panelists for giving time. For all the people who give time to the forum, maraming salamat po.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone, for a very meaningful discussion. It has been a very engaging one, especially, we learned a lot about how we can engage our community and how important the solidarity, not just from the Philippines, but actually from the international level, combining all these elements is to the passage of the SOGIE Equality Bill. Thank you again, everyone. And before we end the discussion or the Filipino Queer Forum, I'd like to present Mr. Peter Terpstra, who's giving the ending remarks. He's the Deputy Head of Mission from the Dutch Embassy in Manila.
Despite cultural differences and language barriers between the Netherlands and the Philippines, the universality of gender equality and human rights can help bring messages across and bridge people to people, as it is doing now with this forum. 2022 is a crucial year for the Philippines, as Filipinos once again go to the polls and vote for their leaders. Today's forum reminds us that representation matters, and that asserting one's SOGIE and rights matter, and transforming perspectives to be more accepting and recognize equality take effort, time, and solidarity amidst diversity. I hope each and every one of you today find encouragement and strength to reclaim your identities and rights. You are not alone. Thank you for attending this forum, and as we say in the Netherlands, orange is always part of the rainbow.
Yes, that was very inspirational. Welcome back, Redem. You're on mute. You're on mute. Redem, you're on mute.
Okay, yeah, sorry,
Welcome back.
I was on mute. So, yeah, so that was really enlightening discussion. I was really, uh, you know, operating the stream and really listening, and they highlighted a lot of important, information on how we can make sure that by next year's election we can create safer and inclusive Philippines.
Yes.
So, yeah, so Sophia,
Medyo overtime tayo, but thank you
yeah.
everyone from thank you everyone who is watching from the Philippines, the US, and everyone also in Europe who have been tuning into our Filipino Queer Forum. We thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts. And this discussion, we hope that it's not the discussion and the dialogue for the inclusion of the Filipino LGBT community in the politics, as well as in the um, greater scale of things, does not end in this forum, and we hope that this will actually translate to the legislation of the SOGIE Equality Bill, as well as encourage more politicians, as well as people, a lot of the electorate, as a our Congresswoman Geraldine Roman has mentioned, that it doesn't end. It actually starts with people. So if we demand it, if we engage ourselves into asking the right questions, and if we ask our representatives, if we ask the politicians that are campaigning for us, if we ask the questions about LGBT and how we can actually include the LGBT rights in their platforms, in their campaigns, for example, then you actually are able to participate in the discussion. So it starts from ourselves. It starts
Yeah,
from the people.
thank you for that, Sophia. And before we fully end this one, I just want to recognize the cooperation and collaboration and support of our partners, the Embassy of Netherlands in the Philippines, Commission on Human Rights, ASEAN SOGIE Caucus, Mujer-LGBT, the Red Whistle, and of course, the Asbury by A Space Manila, which is a transformative private membership hub here in Poblacion. That was a plug. And also, this event won't gonna be happen without the initiative of Filipino LGBT Europe. Thank you so much for trusting and for making this happen. And to all our panelists, thank you for dedicating your time and effort and knowledge in inspiring and also, helping the communities on how to become a wiser voter and also how we can stand together for SOGIE.
Thank you very much for them. Yes, in behalf also of the Filipino LGBT Europe, as it's also the press officer, I'm very happy to end this forum, and I wish you all a good day, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever part of the world you're coming from. Thank you very much.
And this is Brother Musawa, and hasta la vista until our next and upcoming talk on the movement on equality here in the Philippines. So thank you so much and bye-bye.
Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat.